Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the 2025 eCitadel Open Awards ceremony. We started eCitadel 3 years ago because we saw the need for more cybersecurity education, and over eCitadel's history, the program has grown to 167 teams and 581 competitors this year. Before I extend a congratulations and thanks to the many people who made this event happen, I want to thank your coaches, parents, and mentors, and take a second to thank them yourselves. They often spend hours with you, providing resources, getting you where you need to be, keeping you on task and organized, and we definitely appreciate the support they've given to the program and to you as well. And I'd like to thank you all as competitors, both for having an interest in cybersecurity and for taking the time to participate. At the end of today's ceremony, sometime later this evening, I'll send out an individual team debrief that goes over your scores, team ranking if you did not finish in the top 3, and individual feedback for every inject for each team. I'd like to thank a few people specifically who do a lot for this program and spend a lot of nights and weekends working on it. Landon Burge is your tech director. He builds the networks, the environments, all the red team infrastructure. If you saw red team dropping you messages on your desktop or geese showing up, you can thank him for that. Dr. Keith Harrison is our lead developer and works on scoring systems. Dwayne Williams helps us out with operations and sets up the infrastructure. Julian Pena helped us out with operations. J-Mac Bretlinger helped us grade your injects, and Natalie Shaleen is our CIS director. If you don't know, the organization that runs this is called the Center for Infrastructure Assurance and Security here at the University of Texas at San Antonio. And we also host the National Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition, and we just celebrated our 20th annual NCCDC. And a special thank you to MSI, the sponsor of the 2025 eCitadel Open. I've been privileged to work with them before. Some of you may remember that they sponsored the inaugural eCitadel event back in 2023, and I especially want to thank Dalton Wang, who is a pleasure to work with. Let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. My name is Matt. I'm your eCitadel director. I work on scoring systems, the portal, the infrastructure, environment, and just overall logistics. And I'll hand over the mic to Landon.
Howdy y'all, I am Landon, or Kelly Patriot as my Discord handle. I'm the technical director. I work on creating the images, the red team infrastructure. Basically, most of the technical things you guys see is what I handle. A bunch of achievements, blah, blah, blah. Please add me on LinkedIn. But I like making competitions so I can teach what I learn.
Our goals for eCitadel, we want to make cybersecurity education fun and engaging, and we really want to try to raise the bar with other adjacent competitions. From the start, we've always wanted to deliver the best possible competition experience to anyone and keep it open to participate, no matter of your location, your education status, or any hardware capabilities or limitations that you may have. And ultimately, we try to bridge the gap to collegiate competitions by preparing newcomers for some CCDC style challenges that you may have not yet encountered. This year, I'm proud to announce, thanks to MSI, top 3 teams are going to be getting a keyboard and mice combo.
So just to recap on the competition scenario you guys dealt with this year, this is the same slide that you guys saw in the orientation. Welcome to the Retrieve, Extract, and Profit operation, also known as repo. You guys are already familiar with all of that, but I just wanted to recap that. So some topics that we wanted to focus on. These are what we're trying to teach and what we were trying to score you guys on mainly. Documentation ability. The reason for this is pretty much any cyber competition there is some sort of involvement in documentation. We also want to provide examples on the best way to do this. We focused on malware identification and analysis, specifically C2 agents, password exfiltration methods, rootkits, and just other MISC backdoors that are used to maintain access. And finally, a lot of teams struggle to recover from red team actions in, CCDC and other style competitions. A lot of teams will struggle just restarting services, so we're trying to demonstrate how that can help you going forward in these other competitions.
So I guess we should get this debrief started with an operations debrief. And we just wanted to show you guys a little bit of what goes on behind the scenes of running a competition like this. A lot of our goals with operations is if we do our job right, then nobody will notice. And that's what we try to aim for every year. And so often it goes unnoticed. How many hours just gets put into this event. Here are some funny screenshots. This entire past week, it's been storming. We've been working through multiple tornado and hail, and obviously my power went out 5 minutes before this debrief started. On the topic of operations, infrastructure every year is a huge concern to us. And we are working with a very, very limited hardware capability. I talked about this a little in my blog post before, but this year we had about 17 servers. Each team takes up about 7 cores. So we really have a limit of how many teams that we can host every year on our infrastructure. This year it was 186 and we had 178 sign up. So if you're wondering why we enforce competition dates, it's so just to make sure, we don't have 150 teams all try and compete on Saturday and overload our servers. We're always very, very concerned about performance, and we want to make sure, every team has the exact same performance conditions and it's fair for all teams. Another thing we debate every year is, do we do local storage or network storage? Last year we used network storage and we only had a single 10 gig switch. There was a limit to how many servers we could have because we ran out of ports on the switch to plug more servers into, and we don't want to harm bandwidth or IO speeds, disk write speeds for teams. Now this year we used local storage. Some perks of that is, IO and write speeds are faster, but each box we have about 1 terabyte per box. And if you have 10 teams per box, you have 17 servers, the maximum you can have is about 170 teams. So every year we're always very, very limited in, the amount of resources, and we're very concerned with what we can do to make sure that the competition is fair and teams aren't experiencing any sort of lag or performance issues. A little bit on the infrastructure. This year, we made a lot of changes to the portal, and I wanted to talk about that. In past years, we've had registration. Some of you may remember we did it on Google Sheets, and you guys would sign up on Google Sheets, then we would distribute you credentials. Well, teams always run into issues with that. Just distributing credentials, logging into the portal early by accident, and we're always trying to do everything we can to minimize the amount of issues that teams can have. So, this year we did registration entirely on the portal. We added OAuth, which was never done before, and it was certainly a challenge getting OAuth to work with our Inject portal. But you all could individually log in and register a team and change your team name and change your team date, all without having to contact ops to change it for you, which is way more convenient for us than past years. We want to make sure that each server has about the equal amount of teams competing on it at the same time. And so when we clone our machines, we clone them. Team 1 gets cloned to server 1, Team 2 gets cloned to server 2. And we assign a team number based on when a team starts competing. In past years, if a team wanted to change their start date and we had already assigned their team number, we would have to assign them a new number. This year, we made it so, you don't get assigned your team number until you start competing. And it actually works out really well because now, once you're ready to start competing, you're automatically assigned to the server with the least amount of usage. And having everything be done with the portal, so once you guys start, you get assigned a number. The portal will start your boxes and start your 5-minute grace period. The portal will notify Red Team that you've started and tell the service scoring engine to start scoring your services. This 5-minute grace worked out really well to give you guys a couple of green checks and show you all that the network is green before you ever touch it and get access to it. Another thing we did differently this year, we scored your services live. Once you started competing, the portal would tell the service scoring engine, okay, this team started competing, score their services for the next 6 hours. And the same thing with injects. We can assign injects uniquely to each team based on a team's start and stop times. So we can say, I want this inject to be assigned 2 hours in. And the team, no matter when they start competing, they see the inject when it's 2 hours in. It worked out really, really well. Essentially, a team can log into the portal, start and stop competing 6 hours later. The only downside, and it's not really a downside much for competitors, but for us as organizers, is we don't really get to experience you guys competing as we do with like an in-person competition. So you'll have a team who starts and stops 6 hours later, and they have a great time competing, and we barely have any interaction with the team. And it's always fun seeing teams' reactions to, you know, the environment and all that during in-person competitions.
So when it comes to y'all's actual network that you received this year, we had 4 boxes, which you guys are familiar with this kind of table layout of Swiftbrew, McJanic, Headman, and Avante Guard. 2 Windows, 2 Linux. The Alma box obviously had no GUI at the start. And for some services, we had a domain controller, we had a database, and then we had a web server that had 2 different web apps on one web box. But you guys should be familiar with most of that. We wanted to show photos for anyone who didn't get to pay too much attention to their websites. These were some interesting concepts that were available on your store app about, you know, privacy and the conditions of use, that we collect all the data, share all the data, keep it forever, nothing's encrypted, you know. Didn't know if any of you guys noticed it, but I thought it was a very funny example.
Scoring this year, we broke it down into 4 main categories. You know, you had your images, and so these are just finding and fixing vulnerabilities. And we heavily focused them in like categories like forensics and malware, and just things that would be actually relevant to the security of an operating system. You had injects, and this was the first year that we required teams to have written responses to all injects, and just getting teams into the mindset of, you know, creating business style reports. And you had live service scoring. So every 2 or 3 minutes, an automated scoring engine would check and make sure your scored services were externally available. And that's another thing you have to battle while red team is trying to stop and disable your services and cause you to lose points. As organizers, we take a lot of precautions to make sure that all scoring is very fair across teams, no matter like when you compete or the technical resources available to you. For example, we have to make sure that every team received the exact same number of scoring checks. Otherwise, some teams might get a couple more scoring checks with jitter, some might less. So we have to standardize all that. But we do put a lot of like thought and effort into scoring is super fair no matter when you start competing. Onto the Injects Debrief. Unfortunately, we did grade you guys on the professionalism of response, so you probably didn't get any points if you submitted like a meme response. But just know that we did enjoy, you know, seeing all the memes that you guys submitted, and we enjoyed grading them, even if you didn't get points for it. So every inject, again with the topic of keeping things fair, we have the same person grading all of your injects. So it's not one person grades teams 1 through 70 and then another person grades the rest. Just to make sure that interpretation of the rubric is the same. We've given you all customized feedback for every single one of your injects that's been submitted. So later today after the debrief, we'll be publishing that on your team's portal, and you can see exactly what you got points for, exactly what you didn't get points for, and the rubric that we used to grade your injects. We did select a couple of our favorite injects, and with the team's permission, we are going to be announcing them and then later publishing them, just to give you guys an example of what is a good inject. These may not be injects that receive the highest score necessarily, but we felt it was a good example for the majority of you guys to see what is an inject that I should strive to achieve. And every inject that we've assigned, we had a category in the rubric based on the presentation of your inject. So the main categories were if you addressed it. The injects were written to you from the taxman or the CEO. And so in your response, we expected you to write back to the taxman or the CEO, or say who is writing the inject, the IT staff. Obviously, professionalism, if you were professional, and grammar, as long as there weren't a bunch of grammar mistakes in the inject. Most teams did fine on that. Theming, we gave a small point if you kept with a theme. So this could be including any sort of repo image in the inject. If you played into our theme, addressed us as taxman, addressed yourselves as IT staff or incident response team, anything like that. If you had fun with it, we gave you some points for that. And obviously submitting a PDF response. We require a PDF for every single inject, no matter whether you did the inject or not. This year we were very light on the penalties. If you didn't submit a response, or if you submitted something that wasn't a PDF, we didn't dock you that many points. In future years, expect that if you don't upload a PDF, then we might not even grade your inject. It's very important to pay attention to the rubric and do what's asked of you, and just write it like a memo to your boss. You receive the inject as a memo. Your response should be in the form of a memo.
All right, so the first inject you guys were given right at the start of the competition was incident response. So the objective of this was to identify and report active or polling malicious connections. The highest score that was received was 45 points out of 100 points. 2 teams were able to get that. There were 2 different ways that you could gain points through the incident response reports. I'll talk a little bit more about the second way later, but this was an inject that counted. So the one note that I have for every team is the inject specified active or polling connections. The main examples were C2 traffic with Realm and Sliver, and then Xville webhooks with the PAM backdoor and the password filter. There were some other points you could get based on like SSH or the staging server IP, which SSH, red team would SSH into your boxes and execute commands. The staging server was where, if you guys saw the red team is here image, that was pulled from a web server that everything, we pulled in, that IP also would have gotten you points. The best IR reports that we selected, each of these 3 IR reports had a different section within that I believe they explained and detailed very, very well. And so we gave points to each of those 3, or we're going to be releasing each of these 3 teams' IR reports. They were professional and they were descriptive and followed exactly what we were looking for. So congrats to Team 55 from Penn State, Team 152 from UVA and Rutgers, and Team 25 from Tennessee Tech.
On the next inject, you were all asked to scan your network and create a network map. And we also asked you some information about your network, like stored and critical services, IP addresses, DNS records, and expected you to include all that in your report. Some things that we didn't see a lot of teams do is show dependency in their network map. And what I mean by this is you should show how every machine in your network relies on another. So your web servers rely on your database to function, and you should represent dependence somehow. All your machines use the domain controller to authenticate and the DNS server to fulfill DNS requests. So it's very important that you are able to show how the network relies on each other. And another thing some teams did is you simply ran nmap and you copy and pasted your nmap output into the inject, and we didn't give any points for that. We expected you to actually format your output nicely, differentiate what is a scored in critical services versus just every single open port on the box, and create a visually pleasing network map. Later, you will all be able to see exactly what you got points for and what you didn't get points for. And the best network maps, congratulations to Team 113 from Westview High School and Metro East Web Academy, and Team 37 from Stanford University and Franklin High School. We will be publishing these teams' inject submissions later. The next inject, we asked you all to install a desktop environment on Alma and set the background as requested. This was the easiest inject, and this also had the most amount of teams complete this one. 34 teams got a perfect score, and it was relatively simple. You just had to run 2 commands. What we saw most teams do wrong is you just uploaded a screenshot of the desktop with no writing or anything like that. Remember, the inject is a memo to you, and your response should be a memo. So you should address it to the CEO or the taxman and say, hey, I've completed this inject, and then include your screenshot. If you only uploaded a screenshot, well, we gave you some partial credit, but you did miss out on some points. The installing the background on Alma idea came to us because I had accidentally created a background for Alma without realizing it was headless. And this is the second year in a row that I did this. I did the exact same thing last year too, for those of you guys who remember the lethal theme. The best inject in the desktop environment category goes to Team 29 from the University of California, Irvine.
All right, so now we're going to get into the more technical, a little bit more difficult injects. Domain membership. So your task was to connect both the Linux machines to the repo.internal Active Directory domain. We had 5 teams successfully connect all of them and show what was necessary to get a full score. I would personally advise using Realm, not to be confused with the C2, but an SSD or SSSD to connect them to the domain. A lot of you guys saw crypto issues. You can resolve them both on the domain controller, but you could also resolve them within the Kerberos configuration on the local machines. My biggest issue that I saw when looking through all of these injects is that many teams were using the local taxman user on the machine rather than the domain admin account. So I pulled up a screenshot from one of the teams where they used taxman at repo.internal at the IP and show the valid connection request to it. We also used the scoring engine just to do a check and to see if any teams got it or not. And you guys could see that on the portal a little bit ago, but that was not used in the scoring. We were just using the screenshots that were demonstrated in the inject. The best domain membership injects go to Team 25 from Tennessee Tech University and Team 165 from University of New Hampshire. We had a lot of good ones, but these were the most professionally formatted, so we are choosing to release these 2 for teams to view going forward. All right, this inject is one where when you guys read your feedback, it may not be as positive. This is one that we have pretty much done or hinted at for 3 years in a row, and that is domain authentication or SSH pub key authentication with Windows. Not a single team got it working. Any teams that should have got it working, I went and looked through and identified what the issues were. So if your report showed that it should be working, from my opinion, I did go through and verify it manually. That feedback is in your report. I can confirm that not a single team got it working. We were able to test it. The highest score was 40 out of 50 points, so the only the only points missed were getting successful SSH on headmen. Like I said, we point to the solution every year. Please go and read Microsoft documentation on Open SSH pub key authentication. Pay attention to what is different for administrators. And finally, practice this. Every cyber competition I've done usually refers to using SSH pub key authentication within an inject or something along those lines. You guys need to practice that. Next slide. What I'm providing to you guys this year is a brief outline of what you should do. Please write this down or take a screenshot. This will be tested going forward. If we do this another year, I'm going to do this again. I want to see people getting this correct. Make sure you install SSH. A lot of teams miss that. Add the user to the domain and the domain admins group. Some teams miss points because they didn't add it to the domain admins or show that they added it. Ensure that the machine is properly connected to the domain, which related to the last inject, and add the key to the correct location. So on Linux, the biggest issue that I saw was teams were using a local simibot folder instead of simibot at repo.internal, or it could be another folder location like home repo simibot, depending on how you set up the Active Directory authentication. But you got to make sure that it's in the domain user folder. On Windows, this is what everybody messes up. All admins share a public key file because this helps prevent UAC bypass with SSH on Windows. Because if you have it in your local directory, you can not elevate and modify that key, SSH in, and have admin permissions. So all admins have that location rather than the local home directory for their SSH pub key authentication. And finally, a lot of teams mess this up. Make sure that it has the correct permissions, the correct owner, which, root is not the correct owner. It must not be world writable. It was mainly the root ownership that most teams failed. And on Windows, local system and administrators should have access. Typically, when you create this key, it's going to give authorized users access as well. You need to remove that permission, otherwise SSH will error out. And the best new admin inject goes to Team 152 from UVA and Rutgers again. They did very well. They missed one small thing, which is why they were not able to get it, but they had the best formatted inject response and got the most points as well, so they did a very, very good job.
And finally, your final report. This was very open-ended. We wanted to see you all create a report covering the status of the network. As long as you touched on something in the category, we mostly gave you points for it. But there were a few categories we wanted to see, and this is how we broke down scoring because it is so open-ended. Obviously, we asked for an executive summary. We wanted to see you identify any security issues you found. What a lot of teams didn't do is when they identified security issues, you didn't really show any severity or importance. And given that this is a briefing for a board of directors, you should establish some sort of severity or impact for which issues are the most severe, like which ones need to be taken care of right now, which ones are a little bit less severe, and any sort of ranking or impact would have gotten you credit for this. And a lot of teams just missed that. They identified security issues, but they didn't talk about their impact or their severity at all. Remediation was another thing as well. And the other thing a lot of teams missed is any sort of recommendations. So what we were looking for, you're telling the CEO, hey, we did this during our 6 hours today. If we had more time, we would keep doing this, or this is our next priority. Any sort of future action, future recommendation to keep on enhancing the security of the network. That's what we were looking for. Not a lot of teams included that either. And minor details. We asked you to list injects you completed. We asked you to include pictures and technical details. remember, you are giving this like final report to executives, so you should assume some of them don't have any technical knowledge, and you can assume some of them do, and you should try to target both of them. The last thing a lot of teams did that we didn't give you any points for is if you simply pasted your scoring report into your final report. If your security issues were simply verbatim from your scoring report, that didn't get you any points at all. What we were really looking at were the big ideas, like multiple unauthorized users on the system, malware on the system, stuff like that. If you simply said, I set this registry key, you didn't get many points for that. We did give you a lot of detailed feedback for this inject, the most feedback out of like any inject. So later, I highly encourage all of you to go and look at your feedback and look at the published reports. So our best final report was from Team 55 from Pennsylvania State. Congratulations. I encourage all of you guys to go look at this report. This is a very, very well done report.
All right, the time a lot of you are probably waiting for, the best part, the part that I had the most fun with, Red Team Debrief. So this year, something new, something that I don't think has been really been done before, mainly because the style of our competition is a little bit different with teams working at different times. An automated red team operator. So my goal was to simulate a fair red team for every team, no matter when they compete. I gave a bit of a structure of what I did and how it works. Essentially, we had an internal API that the portal would use to start a team, so that's where it says notifying red team. And there would be a loop that would go every few seconds and check for any tasks that are needed for a team based on their start time. It would attempt to use Realm to schedule those tasks. If Realm failed or timed out after 5 minutes, it would go and try to use known compromise credentials like root to complete those tasks. So Realm C2, it's absolutely fantastic. It was really easy to work with the API, and we used pre-planted beacons on server 2022, 2025, and Alma Linux. And like I said, the API was fantastic. You can see an example of what the C2 would actually do. It would schedule the Realm commands and complete them. So the red team timeline, 10 minutes in. You guys all saw good luck messages on the 4 boxes. They were wall messages or the visual windows messages, or what I had to do on SwiftBroom was manually print good luck to your terminal, which you can see in the tiny text on that screenshot at the top. 30 minutes in, I would download Keep Calm Red Team is Here onto all 4 boxes, onto the desktop, or for Alma just in the home directory, just so you guys know that, Red Team was still active 30 minutes in. So, destructive actions. An hour in, you may have noticed that IIS, DNS, and MariaDB were all stopped. 2 hours in, the same thing happened. And then finally, 3 hours in, we disabled the services as well as stopped them. So you can see 2 different teams getting actions deployed on their systems because Team 3 just started, so they were getting their wall messages, but Team 1 was getting to the point where they needed their services stopped, so it would then go and try to stop those. So one piece of advice that I really want to hammer, because a lot of teams, struggle with this, is that if your services are going down early on in competition, consider that they might just be stopped or disabled. A lot of teams failed to recover which I was watching as much as I could, when the only issue would have been restarting the service or restarting multiple in order. The reason I say this is because the web server used DNS to resolve to the database, and the database, was required by the web server. So if you started IS but you didn't stop DNS or the database, it wouldn't work because it couldn't resolve the database or connect to the database. And if some of you may have noticed, Note Commerce is especially sensitive to where you may start IS, then start the database, but Note Commerce refuses to work until you restart IS and the entire service as well. 4 hours in, my favorite, dropping the goose. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the goose later, but you can see a screenshot. This was my own machine that I accidentally left it open. This wasn't another team, but you can see that the goose would just drag text messages asking if you wanted to play repo. If you find the binary that was persisting goose desktop, you could try killing it. I actually pulled this screenshot from one of the teams. If you tried to kill it, it would blue screen because it's a critical process. So next up, the red team timeline. 4.5 hours in, we would break services even harder. You can see that DNS, the exe would get renamed to brotherstop.exe, and we would, 5 hours in, delete all of your web root files, including PHP and the 2 web servers. Yes, killing Hyper-V would blue screen. Then 5.5 hours in and 5 hours and 45 minutes in, we would use either WinInit to blue screen you, or we would just reboot your machine. So if you guys got WinInit 5 hours and 75 minutes in, red team was definitely having fun, or at least the automated red team was definitely having fun with you. This is where like I kind of wanted to focus. I want you guys to hear about this because this was a fun project for me to work on, and I look forward to working on it later. It worked better than I thought would ever happen. There were definitely a few bugs, but I couldn't patch these bugs during the competition because that would make it, different for teams. These bugs made it a bit easier to not get affected by red team actions. I won't go into what it was, but next year it's going to work a lot better. I was hoping that this was fun and educational. I hope that, some of you guys start learning that if your services are down, going and investigating that they may be stopped or disabled, the binary may be renamed, something of that sort. Some flaws that I need to fix. I only had Realm and SSH. Sliver, I tried getting deployed. The API was not working very well. I'm hoping to expand it, using Sliver, using WinRM, things like that. I need to randomize the timing. So I didn't think about this until after, is that if you watched another team, you could probably predict when red team attacks were and instantly recover them. I don't know if any teams did it, but there's not much I can do to stop that. So I need to randomize the timing so that it's not predictable, but it's also not unfair. And finally, a lot of teams, they could just cut out, a small amount of supported persistence, and they would get no more activity. A lot of you guys notice, I didn't get blue screened, I didn't get goosed. We still have a bit more data onto, what was available, what wasn't. But because of these flaws, like once you did, a few little actions, you may have cut out red team completely. Some things I want to add going forward. Passwords were being exported. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But I want to make it to where whenever passwords are exported in some way, it gets funneled into SSH, WinRM, or SMB. And so, like, when you guys change passwords, we're able to reuse those passwords to get back into your machines. It was mentioned during the orientation by someone. I would love to get this working with AI, but I don't know how to keep it fair. I have some ideas. I've been thinking about it. Maybe next year we'll see something along those lines. I'm probably going to pull in some other people to help me, figure out how to handle this. But I would love to see an AI agent manage the persistence. And then finally, more C2 execution clients. So Sliver, I'd like to get working. WinRM, SMB, Netcat. I plan on doing a lot of work with Realm because I love the interface, love how you can interact with it. But I do want to add other methods of being able to connect to everything. So, some interesting statistics we were able to pull. In total, we had 1,329 Sliver beacons, 1,806 Realm beacons. Every time you would reboot or revert, it would create a new beacon. We had 2,981 successful logged events through either Realm or SSH. And we were able to exfil 1,371 unique passwords. The most common password exfilled for a password change was the default password, bruh. That one was amazing. And then, of course, you can see an example of an exfilled password of I hate red team 99. it was a little funny for us to see that. So thank you to whoever had that password. So I want to cover the malware you guys would have seen. I've listed pretty much all of it. I suggest you guys write down all of this and research and deploy all of this malware to figure out what it's doing and figure out how to beat it. Because that's the best way you're going to grow. I don't want to keep any of it from you guys. Some of it was custom written by myself, and I'll describe it, but I won't give source code. But for the C2, there was both Realm and Sliver. So it was just HP or HPS beacons. And, both are open source. For backdoors, we had a netcat backdoor. We had Prism, which is a really, really old ICMP backdoor, which, to reveal what its best use is, it renames itself in PS. So if you run PS, it says udevd instead of like the file location. Multiple PHP backdoors across web servers, authorized and unauthorized. IS RAID, which, was in one of the forensics questions, which was a malicious IS module. We had Nosferatu, which is an NTLM backdoor. There was a forensics question, which we'll talk about a little bit more related to that. And then finally, some sticky keys and utilman backdoors. These were done through the image file execution options, debugger keys. If you don't know what that is, go look it up because it's a really great way to create multiple paths of persistence available later on. Rootkits. So I did want to deploy rootkits this year, but the issue was, how do you score something that's supposed to hide itself? Luckily, I was able to figure out how we could score that using, the find and fix agent. But this year we had King's Guard, which was a Windows userland rootkit. So it was not kernel level, it was userland, using app init to intercept API calls. On Linux, we had Diamorphine, which is a well-known LKM, loadable kernel module, rootkit for Linux. It was stock. I just installed it. I just built it and installed it, so there was nothing changed about that, which was completely on accident, not intended. I intended to change some things for it. But both of those were on there. King's Guard was actually used to hide the Realm backdoor on Server 2022, making it a little bit harder to find. Credential harvesters. Oh yeah, Robbie. So I updated the kernel as much as I could, but since I built the image, another kernel upgrade was made. Oh, by the way, a fair amount of this was taken from RIT's Red Team GitHub. I would 100% everybody should consider go looking at that because they have amazing tools. I love it. A lot of them were very, very useful. So for credential harvesters, I recompiled PAM Unix and exported any successful password changes into a webhook. Also on Windows, there is Windows LSA notification, which example from Kind Time, the Win filter, which it was modified. It was not the same exact version. I had to modify it a bit, but it's a good example of this process of Windows password filters. BashRC harvester. So on Mcjanic, if you ran sudo, it would give you a sudo prompt, but sudo authentication was also disabled. And so you shouldn't have gotten a sudo prompt anyways. That's two different vulnerabilities in one right there. But it would log your sudo password to that file, the var lib mysql file, every time you ran sudo. And so that was another example of a credential harvester. Finally, my custom malware that I wrote. First off was a Linux persistence binary written in Golang. I love Golang. It would start off by copying xtables and ftmulti, which is where the IP tables binary links to, and to a different location. And then every 5 minutes, it would add tswift, shout out tswift, and not red team, please don't delete. It would start the SSH service, and it would drop all firewall rules first using xtables binary. If it didn't exist, it would use the backed up version, and then copy that back. Next, we had a malicious WFP rule. This one was hidden to where it would be useful, but not, it wouldn't allow everything through the firewall. I'm not going to go into much with this. It is a very complicated subject. The top teams are going to start learning WFP and actually going through and reading the documentation and following all of this to actually figure out how it works, this is going to change the cyber game with these competitions going forward. I recommend looking into it. Not going to go further than that. And then finally, my favorite thing that I wrote a few years ago is the Goose Desktop's persistence. So this is a hidden service, so it doesn't pop up in Service Manager, where it was a critical process as well, so it would blue screen whenever you try to kill it. Every 5 minutes, if it detects that Goose Desktop was deleted or killed, it would go and extract from within the own binary. It would extract Goose Desktop and then run it. I love this binary. It's my favorite piece of malware I've written because it's so funny when teams delete it and then 5 minutes later see it come back. I'm not going to go much into it, but I would recommend trying to recreate this yourself. It's a very fun project. I really, really enjoyed it. All right, so red team scoring. There was a penalty assessed. This was the only way we could, in a good way, assess penalties or any scoring with this. We were recording the Realm C2 callbacks, all of it was stored, and we were calculating CCS uptime. And the reason we did this is if a team competed for 3 hours and red team had access the entire 3 hours versus a team competed 6 hours and red team only had access 3 hours, they deserved half the penalty. So, for the 3 boxes Realm was on, Alma, Server 2022, and Server 2025, teams would get penalized up to 50 points per box based on that percentage outcome. You could gain up to half of those points back by identifying the IP that Realm was connecting to or the file service name of the Realm implant. We pulled this from your incident response inject. This was a separate opportunity to gain points. So you could get points by doing the inject, but also get points back from red team scoring penalties by just identifying these 2 things. And finally, some screenshots. You can see the Realm statistics there of all the execution. I was just using command. I wasn't using any tombs for those of you that are familiar. It was just command execution. We ended up with 656 hosts. So that was my sliver output. That was a very, very small section of the sliver output. We had so many binaries. That was the most legible screenshot I could get with showing everything. We have a team who changed all system users to the password. My favorite, because system users needed their password changed. Don't know who that was, but that was very funny when I saw it. So thank you for that. Some more passwords, not very nice ones. We also love repo, a team's IR report showing Goose Desktop, and then finally one of the teams, which going forward, please don't do this. But a team tried communicated through us through the webhooks, and we decided to respond to get back to work. Oh, and you may have noticed some of your Server 2022 binaries were signed and valid by Microsoft Corporation. That was a custom CA that I made. Red teamers will usually do this, so this is something you have to learn to look out for. If you see a malicious binary that seems to be signed, you should remove that certificate so you can validate whether or not a binary is actually signed by Microsoft or made up by me. So that's something also to keep an eye out for. That concludes the Red Team debrief. We'll take some questions later if you guys have any more questions. I want to answer as much as I can, and I want to help you guys learn. But going into the next section is your images. So these are the 4 images you guys had. One of them was obviously terminal-based at the start. I want to go over, a majority of the points were malware or malware-related. Whenever you find malware, you should have analyzed it, determined what it might be affecting. This helps you get more points. So I have a few examples. 25 teams found the bash RC credential harvester, but only 15 deleted that output file. So 10 teams left the output file, but deleted the credential harvester in the first place. 125 teams correctly answered the VSFTPD exported sensitive data forensics question, but only 18 removed that data, and only 41 removed VSFTPD, which, by the way, was a vulnerable version with a backdoor. So I want to go into mainly forensics questions. If you guys ask a question in the questions channel, I tried answering it. I think I'm answering most of them, but first off, the binary dropping IP table rules. User SBIN UFW was not UFW. Answering the question, there were multiple solutions that you could have taken. You could have made a bash script and replaced that binary with the bash script logging the parent PID. You could have searched in bin or SBIN for IP tables, just a string. There would only be a few binaries, like 6, that would pop up. And you could use any of like the logging features like PSPY or Snoopy to figure that one out as well. So for forensics question 2, it asked about SSH certificate authentication. I mainly wanted to point to this because this is something I didn't learn until this year, is that you can use not pub keys, but certificates in order to authenticate to a server. If you found the trusted user CA key, you could use SSH keygen to answer that question. I highly recommend that you configure that you research how SSH can be configured for authentication, because there are multiple ways, and red teamers love to exploit the different ways in order to hide from you and use SSH. Finally, forensics question 3, I asked about the prefix. I mentioned diamorphine. Go research it. There you go. Another tip for Alma, or I guess just Linux in general, is to check systemd services. A majority of the persistence I had was through systemd services. It's the easiest way to persist. You can see systemd text systemd.service was actually just netcat. You should recognize that. And there were a few other services there. If you list by time edited, you're gonna be able to find more services. So like the UFW service or the systemd alert service. Obviously, sometimes you can timestamp. So like the UDevD service, I timestamped to match everything else. It was actually the realm binary, I believe, for that one. So, which is why I timestamped it, to keep that one the most hidden. But it's something you can look into in case a red teamer forgets to timestamp their things. They do a lot. They forget all the time. So always check, especially within that directory, just to see what systemd services are still, or like most recently created, and investigate those further. So, on Mint, the fake no login shell. If you see in that command, I list that file path, and there were 2 outputs. One of those had a space. That was actually bash. And so while if you cat etc password, it looks like user sbin no login, it was actually that binary location with the space afterwards. And there were 2 users with that. And then for question 3, the webhooks, I listed it as an example of this Linux PAM backdoor. I encourage you guys to look it up and experiment around with it. It's just an example of how you can recompile PAM in order to backdoor it for your own things. So you can find the PAM Unix so binary location and search to find that webhook endpoint. So server 2022. One team got this forensics question. So this required a little bit of reverse engineering. I thought it was an interesting challenge. I didn't think any team would get it, mainly because it was a very difficult to complete and time wasting, in my opinion. But if you found the Nosferatu backdoor and reversed the source, like reversed the DLL, you could pull that hash, which I showed the function, and put it into, any sort of like NTLM hash cracker or searcher, and find that the hash was actually lethal ? This is why you guys had issues with logging in. So if you, which actually has happened to every team, when you booted up server 2022 and it would cause an issue where it'd say invalid password for a few times, that's because of this. If you remove this, you would have no more issues like that. But if you logged in and then locked your screen, you could log back in using lethal ? So forensics question 2, this one not a single team got, which to clarify, someone else made this forensics question and I modified it. It may not have been clear enough. I thought it was fine, but since no other teams got it, I'm going to take the responsibility that that wasn't good enough. So it was a trick question where the PID was not within like an event log PID field. It was actually a command line parameter. And so you could, like, this is modifying the LSASS process to remove protection. And so the PID was actually in a flag rather than a field. And that's why I don't think any teams got it. But like I said, it may have been worded wrong. It was, yeah, I'll take blame for that because I was modifying it, trying to make it a bit easier, things like that. But that is the answer. I know someone asked about it. So with the Windows Firewall, the service DLL, I renamed it from MPS SVC and changed it to firewall.dll, which doesn't exist. Whenever you have issues where it seems like the service parameters are being modified, my recommendation is get a known good config, export it, and then re-import it. Good luck brute forcing it. You wouldn't have enough time to get that done correctly. We have things to prevent that. But, you know, good thought. And that wraps it up. So, you know, now's the time if you guys have questions, if there's anything I didn't answer, question on either ops or the actual images, things like that. We're here to help you guys learn. So Nosferatu, how did I get it to persist? I'm not going to tell you completely, but all I can say is a different service was overwritten to the point that it wouldn't even show in auto runs. It's a cool trick that someone else showed me. Yes, RIT Red Team is pretty fire. I'm grateful for a lot of their tools, especially for open sourcing them. Actual recommendations, obviously, yeah, you're right, there's a lot to learn, but I think multiple communities have gathered a lot of resources for this, and learning more is mainly just if you find a topic or a subject that you like or you want to learn more about, is just going and investigating it. And you have to spend time. It takes time. I've spent hundreds of thousands of hours on, well, probably not that much, but like on cyber stuff where I just, as soon as I find something new, I go and investigate it and learn as much as I can. But the actual, like, where to learn it, there's so much that there's not really one central place for the most part. Obviously, the Cyber Patriot Discord is a really good example. These debriefs that we run, great example. Anything CCDC, look in CCDC team repos, things like that. All of that is going to help you find new things to learn. Why are people doing these things? Go ahead and try and investigate that on your own time. Intended way to solve the WFP forensics, WFP Explorer, and investigating different things. Yes, auto runs is definitely a bit behind. Okay, so with the Goose desktop, that's because it was a red team action, and like I said, there were a few bugs that made it easier to kick out red team rather than harder. So that's why you may not have seen it. But for the actual red team penalty, we do have accurate data to penalize for that. Best way to learn about red team tactics. I mean, probably the best one is the MITRE framework. A lot of red teamers will base all their tactics off of that. And RIT Red Team GitHub. A lot of things are there.
I don't think there are any more questions, so we can go ahead and get into announcing the winners. In third place is Team 169 from the University of Central Florida. In second place, we have Team 152 from the University of Virginia and Rutgers University. And finally, your eCitadel 2025 champions is Team 37 from Stanford University and Franklin High School. Congrats to all the teams, and especially our 2025 champions. This concludes the award ceremony for this evening. Thank you for your attendance and participation, and we all hope to see you next season. So thank you very much, and good night.